Welcome to the Scott and Holland podcast. Tonight's episode is going to be a bit different than usual. If you listen to our show, generally the format is we talk about multiple U of H sports topics, and this will be a bit different because of the nature of the topic we're talking about tonight, and that in the biggest picture sense, that this topic deserved to stand on its own, that topic being Houston Cougar Softball and a number of pretty disturbing allegations of things that have gone on within that program. So I'd encourage you, even if you're someone who doesn't generally consider themselves a big softball fan, to give this episode a listen. The contents of the episode won't make you happy. Certainly, it didn't make us happy gathering the information for the episode, but I hope that you still decide to listen, whoever you are. Everything we're choosing to talk about tonight's episode bears repeating, is corroborated by multiple individuals with firsthand knowledge of the U of H softball program. Everything here was done to a very strict standard. We even got the advice of legal counsel in advance of recording this specific episode. But above all else, I think the reason we're on here tonight, the reason why all of us haven't probably slept that great in the days leading up to recording this podcast, is because this is a tough story to tell, tough subject matter to talk about, but it absolutely needs to be told. And I'm comfortable here saying that for all three of us on the show. So Dustin, Bobby, if you're okay with it, I think we should just skip our usual friendly formalities and get to the topic at hand if you're both okay with that.
Yeah, let's do it, bud.
So I think I'll start this off here, give some very basic background to the story, all stuff that's in the public domain, but if you don't follow this program super closely, I think here's a very, very quick summary. Kristin Vesely has been the head coach of Houston Cougar Softball since the 2017 season. Previously, Vesely was an assistant coach on the staff of Kyle Hollis, UH's first ever coach. UH went to the NCAA postseason in 2018 and returned in 2019. In this most recent season, this past spring, U of H had a 25-30 overall record and went 4-23 in Big 12 play. I would say it's all the basic program facts between the lines. Is that correct, guys?
Yeah.
So Dustin, I think, why don't you get us started with the most serious allegations towards this program? Kind of let's go from there.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to say up front is, I've said out loud multiple times during the 9+ years we've done this podcast, we don't pretend to be journalists. And what I mean by that is this isn't any of our jobs. I don't know about y'all. I've never watched a sporting event from press row or the press box. I buy my tickets and I scream my lungs out for the Cougars. And then I come back here and I talk to y'all and I talk to our listeners, fan to fan. Been always happy to leave the journalism piece to Joseph Duarte, who does a fantastic job. Our friend Ryan at GoCougs.com does excellent work. We've never really felt the need to cultivate sources or try to break news, but we do keep our eyes and our ears open. And sometimes people tell us things, and usually it's something like Houston is looking at this guy in the portal, with the understanding that we're going to keep that to ourselves. But kind of like Sam's been alluding to recently, the things that we were being told are of a much different nature, things that it felt like the only appropriate response to hearing them was to say things like, please tell me more, and are you okay with us repeating this? And can you point me towards anyone else who can back up your story? And that is basically what led us to this episode, which is the culmination of extensive conversations that we've had with 6 University of Houston softball team sources. The 6 sources are a combination of players and team personnel. They include individuals who reached out to us, as well as individuals whom we reached out to of our own accord. The one thing that I would say that they all have in common is that every single one of them was extremely concerned about maintaining their anonymity. And the reason that we heard again and again explaining why they were so concerned was because they alleged that in the past, when individuals brought concerns about Coach Vesely to U of H administration, not only did administration not act, but that their anonymity was not kept, and Coach Vesely found out right away and retaliated against them for that. So for that reason, we decided it was extremely reasonable to grant anonymity to the sources who were willing to speak to us. And I will say we spoke to everybody individually so as to avoid groupthink. And as Sam said, we are only going to mention allegations that were independently put forth to us by multiple sources. So again, once more, before we start, none of us claims any firsthand knowledge of the veracity of the allegations being made, but we are only going to tell you things that between 2 and 6 firsthand team sources relayed to us. So the lead that we can't bury on this one in terms of the allegations is that several sources alleged that a specific player, we'll call her player A, kept a gun in her possession during the 2024 season, and she threatened multiple teammates with said gun over multiple incidents. Furthermore, it is alleged that several players brought their concerns to Coach Vesely, specifically that they did not feel safe around player A and that Coach Vesely did not act on those concerns. Two sources independently and unprompted quoted Coach Vesely as saying that players' safety concerns, quote, didn't matter. As a result of these and other concerns, it is alleged that there was a meeting that included several Cougar softball players, U of H Vice President for Athletics Chris Pesman, and Executive Senior Associate Athletics Director for Student Athlete Development, Dwana Chiser. The meeting occurred on or around May 13th. At the meeting, the players were told that U of H administration had ideas for how to handle the situation and they would be in contact with the players going forward. It's been about three plus weeks now. U of H administration has not reached out to the concerned players and is not responding to their requests for further meetings or updates. Multiple sources expressed what I'd call disappointment, but a lack of surprise at this outcome, and alleged a close personal friendship between Dwana Chiser and Kristin Vesely that helped insulate Vesely from consequences. Other allegations include that Coach Vesely regularly and publicly belittled and intimidated players, assistant coaches, team trainers, and other team staff. In addition to just treating them poorly as humans, it is alleged that she regularly overruled them in their areas of expertise, taking the form of everything from overruling coaching plans that were put in place by her assistants, which players felt was to the detriment of their development, to preventing the team nutritionist from providing players with meals and snacks at what the nutritionist felt were appropriate times. Furthermore, multiple sources allege that Coach Vesely frequently pitted players against each other in a way that made them feel uncomfortable and that they felt was not conducive to a healthy team atmosphere. Sources allege that Vesely encouraged players to fight one another, and also that Vesely on multiple occasions expressed a desire to fight her players herself. We asked U of H Athletics for comment about the gun allegation, about a broader culture of intimidation in the program, and about the meeting between Pesman, Chiser, and softball student athletes, and whether or not the athletics department would be forthcoming in addressing the questions and concerns that were brought to them by these individuals. We received back a statement which reads in full, quote, University of Houston Athletics takes any report of misconduct that threatens the personal rights, safety, or well-being of our student athletes seriously. The university, including the police department, reviewed the matter and did not substantiate the allegations, but will continue to monitor. The safety and welfare of our students will always remain our highest priority. End quote. So that is kind of laying everything out there. Bob, you haven't really spoken on this episode yet. You want to get us started and kind of some thoughts about the main allegation and U of H's response to it?
Yeah, so, the main allegation being the player A having the gun and intimidating teammates with it is just unacceptable. I just, we first heard it kind of as a reply to a tweet about a transfer out of the program. And when we heard that, we were like, that's kind of crazy. Don't really expect that. And then to what you said, Dustin, we had people reach out to us, sources within the program reach out to us and, kind of say, hey, these things happened. And I think we had a very long discussion, multiple days, talking about how are we going to approach this. That source reached out to us and frankly, we had to cover our bases and go, hey, there's one source that we can believe confirming what we're seeing there, but we need more sources. And so reaching out to those sources and hearing these stories, we kind of just heard the initial ones, some of those, but as we started talking to more and more people within the program, it just became clear that this culture that has been going on in our softball program is just at a point that it's very toxic, and you can tell, just kind of analyzing things from the other side, you see all the transfers coming in and out. You see the turnover in staff, and it just starts to make more and more sense. Are all of them true? If enough people say it, you have to kind of believe it and report on it on our end. But in terms of the actual allegation, it's completely unacceptable for a player to be traveling with a handgun and threatening their teammates with it. I don't know what else to say besides it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable, and it is not something that we should be encouraging or ignoring at the University of Houston. I take great pride in this podcast and in being somebody who speaks up for our university and things of that nature. And this is one of those things that you hear about and, you know, kind of gets swept under the rug. And that is something that, to our credit, to the three of us, when Baylor things were happening and we were like, I can't believe you didn't know and that you hit it. We were upset about that, and we're upset about this. It's no different because it's the University of Houston.
Yeah, I think what was really shocking to me, from what was told to us, several different players brought their concerns about that player having a gun and acting erratically, and that nothing was done about it afterwards, to the knowledge of any source we talked to on this team. Players, Dustin referenced a statement from U of H. Players were not made privy to any investigation U of H did or didn't do. Guys, am I missing something in the reporting there?
No.
Like, I mean, U of H alleges an investigation happened, but you would think that would be you would think that would be something conveyed at any point, and we didn't get any of that when we talked to. And that one of the allegations you mentioned, us, is that Vesely, multiple sources are reporting this, that Vesely told players that their thoughts and their concerns about their safety, quote, didn't matter at this point, that there were no consequences to this player who everyone knew was carrying a gun on them. And you had an incident on the road where an assistant coach needed to get involved because that player was threatening to beat up a teammate. You already have this previous erratic behavior. I think the first time during the season that one of the sources became aware of the weapon was player A talking about using that gun to kill a stray dog, which obviously was fairly disturbing to everyone that heard it. You have this player threatening to beat up a teammate, and that out of that, there was no obvious consequences to anyone that we talked to, like a benching or a suspension or anything
or kicking
like
them,
that, or kicking them off the team, which I think would be perfectly reasonable. And again, like, this is, you could go in a long direction of, hey, well, is it a licensed, I mean, could do the big debate about whether or not, the gun debate is way above our head. I think the situation here, clearly toxic, clearly not a player from several different accounts that should have been carrying a weapon like that. Just not good for a team environment. And that you didn't just have the situation get ignored you had it ignored at the administrative level, which I think we'll elaborate on that more later on here, because that was a big point that just came up over and over and over again, every facet of reporting this out was that, but ignored at the coaching level as well. And just, I think I will use this word again, it will come back, but I find it all very baffling. The response to it, I would say baffling is the word that in my head comes up over and over again with this allegation and just everything that we're going to talk about tonight put together with this program.
Yeah, and I mean, to get back to the statement that U of H provided to us, it says the kind of one sentence that actually was the meat of the statement. It says the university police didn't substantiate the claim, but it's worth pointing out that the claim that someone threatened you with a gun is incredibly hard to prove. It's not like what physical evidence is going to be left over from a threat like that. And unless you got on camera, kind of by definition, it's she said. But also at the end of the day, a bunch of your players felt unsafe. Despite the fact that 2 of the 3 sentences in the statement that U of H gave us amounted to, we want our students to feel safe, they didn't, they don't, and you didn't do anything about it or even try to explain to them why you're not going to do anything about it. Your students who came to you and told you that they felt unsafe in their own program feel like you ghosted them. That's a problem, period. I'm sure if we talked to 5 different people who were there, giving them truth serum, they might still all give us 5 different, explanations of exactly what happened. But given the number of people we heard from, the consistency in their statements, it's extremely hard for me to believe that they invented it out of whole cloth.
Yeah. I would bet every dollar in my account, every asset to my name, that again, details different from person to person based on perspective, that this is not being made up out of whole cloth. This absolutely happened. I feel as confident saying that in this microphone as anything I've done here. Sorry, Dustin, cut you off.
Yeah, no, for sure. But like I said, your students having that experience, regardless of the details of the situation, that's a problem. It's an even bigger problem when you consider how much courage it took for them to go to that meeting with U of H leadership, given that maybe the number one most common thing we heard right away from everyone we spoke with,
100%.
Your students don't feel safe coming to U of H administration with concerns about the softball program because of a culture where whistleblowers are ignored and retaliated against. That's wildly unacceptable. And it speaks to the notion that this wasn't the first time that softball players had concerns about Coach Vesely that they felt compelled to report in a manner that they hoped would be anonymous. If this was the first incident that had come up, no one would know what happens when you anonymously report a problem with the softball administration, because no one would have known. It would have never, they would have no track record to base it on. Everyone associated with this program that spoke to us, like I said, extremely, extremely hesitant to do so, and only after repeated assurances that we were going to maintain their anonymity, because they had explicitly been burned before on bringing up allegations like this, having nothing happen, and then having their anonymity not maintained, which is just atrocious. It's an unacceptable state for the, we've talked a lot about this year about the wins and losses. It doesn't matter if you're winning games left and right or if you're losing games left and right. This is just not an acceptable condition for your program to be in, where coaches, players, trainers, everyone down the line feels intimidated and bullied, and they don't feel like they can speak up for fear of retaliation.
Yeah, and there's a fine line between coaching and crossing a line into abuse, and crossing a line into really doing harm, right? There's a fine line between that, and I get that sometimes. But as to y'all's point, every source we talked to seemed like that a line had been crossed, at least with them. And it's been multiple people, multiple sources that we've talked to about this. And, we talk about the meeting that happened, and to your point, Dustin, it takes a lot of courage when you've already reported something once, and nothing happened, to then accept a meeting and go in and do that as well. And for them to just kind of be ignored, really speaks volumes about the level of, what's the word I'm looking for here? The level of responsibility that falls on the administration in this.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like Dustin said, I don't know if any allocation here was supported by more different sources than the fact that no matter where DeWan Chiser is on the U of H org chart or job titles or what have you, that there's no real meaningful administrative oversight happening of the Houston Cougar softball program, or any oversight when it comes to things like this, where some party involved is not satisfied with the resolution of some problem. That's the most, I think, generic HR way of kind of describing something like this. And obviously that takes many forms. Like, not everything we're talking about tonight is the exact same kind of problem, but it all has this one through line of nobody at U of H with any power to have any kind of oversight over the softball program, over Kristin Vesely, is actually exercising that power. And, again, like, I want to say, like, the job as an administrator isn't to be a rubber stamp on the opposite side of the coin of any allegation against a coach. Like, at the same time, though, it's so obvious here that there isn't even the appearance of somebody in the position of holding this head coach accountable who is actually willing to do so. And just, described to multiple different sources in reporting this out that Chiser's closeness with Vesely made even the act of reaching out about a program problem not just discouraged in the most, I think, explicit and implicit terms. That the reason Vesely has this unchecked power over the program, feels emboldened to act this way, is because it's friendship. It is exhibit A of why in a professional setting like this that you don't have that kind of this closeness, because at the end of the day you need this administrator to hold the program accountable. Like, I'm not trying to give Chris Pesman a pass here. I don't think anything about what we do tonight will be giving him a pass, but you could still say, okay, the athletic director can't be laser focused on all athletic programs. It's not the nature of the job. That's not also giving Chris Pesman a pass for, I think, some pretty unacceptable oversight, just lack of following up on stuff. But it is the job of him to be the CEO, quote unquote, of athletics. You rely in the situation, for a check on the program head coach to be this senior admin. And I think you said it a few different ways now. It's just so clear that is not happening here, and that certainly did not happen in the recent history of this program.
Yeah, and I do want to point out, while we're talking about the main, gun threatening allegation, I think anytime there's an allegation of any athlete doing anything legally dubious, there will always be those wanting to make the standard for judging them in the public sphere. Unless they're convicted of something in a court of law, there shouldn't be any consequences for them whatsoever. Kind of seems to be the implied standard that U of H is using based on
business statement we got,
that they gave to us. But of course, that can't be the standard. You see all the time, especially in college, student athletes quietly dismissed from teams or dismissed with a comment of, violation of team rules. And again, it doesn't take feeling what happened is that player A broke the law and should have gone to jail. It doesn't take that to say that, hey, this person is making a substantial number of their teammates feel substantially uncomfortable for their well-being. You violated team rules at that point. At that point, you just got to go. There's no two ways around it. And again, we're not here claiming to be legal experts. We're not here claiming that that the police investigation was flawed or that something else should have been done. Like I said, you can just transparently look at the atmosphere that has been created around this program, specifically as a result of the failure to take action on disciplining in any way player A, and go, that's a problem. That's just unacceptable the way that was handled. We're just kind of regardless of the details of exactly what went down. Looking at the other stuff, the other allegations that we touched on there, hearing multiple sources allege that Vesely on multiple occasions overruled the team nutritionist on when, both the nutritionist and the players thought they needed at least a snack was galling to me. Denying players food and or water has a long history in sports, and there's just no reason for it. It's cruel, and it's not good for athletes.
No evidence it actually does anything.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The opposite. You'd think as a coach, just selfishly wanting your players to be healthy so you can win games,
and also like that's the team nutritionist job.
That is the reason that they're hired, is to determine.
Like if they were telling you to come up with a first and third play or something, like, mind your business. But like that's kind of that's what they're paid for.
Your players, according to one source, haven't eaten in several hours. Have been practicing for the last few hours. We need to give them some snacks. That's a nutritionist's job, is to speak up and say that kind of thing. And just denying that. Normally, that's the kind of thing I would describe as fake tough guy bullshit. But I guess it appears that way of thinking is not exclusive to male coaches in men's sports.
Yeah, I think that was one thing that's conveyed to us by multiple sources. Specifically, one road trip from the most recent season, they traveled, I think, like 5-ish hours to A&M Commerce, which is about an hour and a half or so east of Dallas, Bobby, if you want to kind of picture that.
Yeah, I drove through it. It's probably an hour 15, hour 30.
Yeah, so decent haul, but probably drivable trip, but decent haul. And that the team went straight from fairly lengthy bus trip to the practice field and didn't eat for almost 8 hours or something like that, which is just like, when the context here is that these are elite athletes. These are all Division I athletes. Like, whatever level you think these are some of the best softball players definitionally in the country playing here. And just the things that were told to us in terms of, this is like the general nutrition plan, just like, oh yeah, we're going to make this team go straight from like a long bus trip to a 2-hour practice while like the coaches and Vesely eat on the bus and something like that. That's just like, it's galling. I fully co-sign what you said, Dustin. It is fake tough guy bullshit.
Yeah. And for me, some of the other accusations just that we heard from multiple sources, right? Coach Vesely threatening to fight her players. That just seems so weird to me, to just want to fight your players. Like, you recruited them, and you see, like, not to compare it to the best program that we have. But I just never see Kelvin Sampson wanting, physically threatening to fight a player.
The most generous reading is it's just
saying,
like it's like a joke that didn't land, but if like you're doing it over and over again and
yeah,
clearly like your
again,
players don't
it's
like
fake
it,
tough guy
it's like
bullshit.
they're not responding to this.
Again, yeah,
Even the one player who described that happening and said, "I think she was joking," said, "But why is she joking like this? Like that's not an appropriate joke to make."
Yeah, and then encouraging your players to fight each other, like it just. Look, I'm not a D1 head coach of any sport, but a lot of times when you see successful teams, they talk about the team bonding and, we took this one trip and we became brothers and sisters on this trip and we decided we were going to stick together. Is that really fostering that kind of attitude among the team? Like, you can talk about, we talk about the gun allegations, we talk about the meeting and the fact that, but like none of this stuff was doing good
counterproductive
for their performance. It didn't lead, not that it would be okay if it led to wins, but like there are things that you don't see successful teams do. You see successful teams come together as one, right? We're a team, we stick together through and through. We're not fighting each other. We're not swinging at each other. The leader of our team isn't wanting to physically fight me. It's unacceptable.
Yeah, you're kind of hitting.
And it's just counterintuitive to what it even seems like you would want, the type of community you would want to foster on your Division I softball program.
Yeah, sorry for jumping over that. I was just going to say,
no,
you're basically kind of saying the next bullet point I had, which is just, you always hear a description of how the great coaches in any given sport are masters at getting their players to work together and pull together as one unit. We heard over and over again sources describing Coach Vesely's actions as being divisive, as having a negative impact on team morale, as having a negative impact on team performance. And it seemed like she was, and again, we're only passing along allegations, and we can't read Coach Vesely's motives for doing any of these things. But it's hard to even imagine where the motivation for that is coming from. Like what? Yeah, it's hard to imagine putting myself in the headspace of again what source after source described as intentionally pitting players against each other. It just does not. It feels needlessly cruel in the first place, and it feels like counterproductive to winning games, kind of like we've been saying.
Weirdly draconian rules too. One that really stood out to me when we talked to several different people and kind of again try to kind of see the through lines between what we got from a number of different, not all of them player perspectives with firsthand knowledge of the program is stuff like the team not being allowed to leave the hotel before or after games if they were on a road trip, and hearing from players that had been from other programs or players that had left U of H that they still kept in touch with, that this was not normal, that basically every other team allowed that, or teams go just things that you like take for granted, things that even I think probably all of us like at the much lower level of sports that we played previously in our lives. Like I went to countless meals with various teams that was on a much lower level over the years, guys. I would assume you did the same various, and just like to be told like, oh yeah, no, we like the team didn't go out for meals. We had the food delivered to us cold at where we were staying. Things like we weren't allowed to see family and friends. It just, yeah, like you said, Dustin, you can't prescribe motive to anything because we don't know. We're not in the head of anyone there. We can only report what we've verified from multiple people that we have firsthand knowledge, saying that for the umpteenth time this episode. But you just look at stuff like that. Like, what's the goal of that rule? What's the, how do you think doing that and restricting your players from seeing friends or family? Like, obviously, like you have team obligations. You can't, after game, you can't spend the whole time away from the team. Like the majority of your time on a road trip, you acknowledge it needs to be, centered around what you were on the trip for. But like denying seeing like family and friends who've in some cases traveled a pretty considerable distance to watch athletes play. Like what's the end game here? What's that accomplishing? What is that doing to further winning here? Because that's above all else, like that's the goal, winning habits and winning culture, et cetera, et cetera. Go any sports team and at any level, and that's kind of the connecting thing. What's accomplishing that here? It just it feels like with that, and it feels like with some of the other things we've talked about and some of the things that we were told, that it's simply about this head coach's power. It's simply about this head coach feeling like, and again, can't prescribe exact motives here, but it's hard to see what this does to encourage winning, to the end goal, either encourage winning or encouraging a team atmosphere, or some combination of that. Like, you don't see hardly any of that here, and certainly didn't see it. And I know, like, what I'm describing here is a lot less serious. Like, not everything we're talking about here tonight is on the exact same level as like the gun allegation and U of H's failure to follow up on it. Like, that's not the goal here. But like, that was something that stood out to me, that was just like, why? Like, and again, like I said at the top, I would bet everything that I have that's not being invented out of whole cloth, that someone didn't just decide, hey, I'm going to make this up. Like, I'm fairly positive several different people told us this happened.
Yeah, and for me, just a couple of things that you said there, Sam. Yeah, sure, these allegations aren't as big of a deal as the gun allegations and things like that. But we're not just talking about an isolated incident here. This is about the culture of the University of Houston softball program and what is happening with the culture of that program. And all of these things play a role in it. Now, is the thing that caught our attention most? Absolutely, it was the gun allegation. But as we started to peel back, the layers of the onion, we started uncovering more. The more we learned that it wasn't just that one incident. Not that that one incident is forgivable, right? But if that's your only incident, okay, like, it's not good. It's not
took a staggeringly
great.
Bad judgment from anyone in a power position here.
Yes, right? It's awful. But then you start peeling back that onion and you start seeing that this is a culture here, a culture of intimidation, a culture of power, of fighting everybody for this power. That's the troubling issue for me, is the culture that is permeating through Cougar softball, through these allegations, right? And again, to your point, Sam, I would bet just about everything that I have that most of these allegations are true. Because everything's been corroborated by multiple people, multiple sources. And to your thing, Sam, also about the not allowing the players to go out with their family and things like that. Sorry about that. Not allowing the players to go out. Like, I get it. You want the team to be together, spend time together. You build that teamwork culture, everything. You want them to spend time with each other. But there's also, you set a curfew, right? You got to be back in your room by 8 o'clock. We get here at 4. We have stretching at 5. And from 6 to 8, you can go do as you please with your family, with your, whoever's here to visit you, whoever traveled to see the game. It didn't appear that these sources were telling us that the players were asking to go out to the bar or the club or something like that and sit there and get a couple of drinks and unwind. It was definitely, I was trying to go to, the sources were saying players were asking to go to dinner with their parents or their families or friends who traveled to see them. And I can understand wanting your players to be in and not staying out late and going out causing trouble and things like that. But there's also a fine line between that and delivering them cold food into their hotel room.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're so concerned about player accountability here like that, that's a funny juxtaposition of like this incredibly strict rule in terms of like players can't leave the hotel we're on this road trip, but also one player can repeatedly threaten and have a deadly weapon on them, and like that's fine. Like that's the kind of stuff that we've described here. It's almost like a case study in like what not to do in terms of zoom out from even sports, just like bad organizational culture, period. Whether that's a sports team, whether that's a it's a workplace, whatever. It just, everything screams what not to do in terms of building a cohesive culture. Like it is hard to have a team sport where you make everyone happy. I think that's worth acknowledging, at least in the abstract. But I think you said something similar to at the top, Dustin. Just it's so obvious that morale is so low here. And to circle back on something I think you mentioned earlier, just some of the stuff we were told, I think explains not just the churn on the roster, because there's been a lot of like comings and goings on the roster in the past several seasons, but on the staff as well. U of H has had, and this is fact, U of H has had 6 different people serve in one of the 2 full-time assistant roles since the 2020 season. Like you said, we were earlier, Dustin, we were told by one source that Vesely would regularly change the practice plans that assistant coaches would create for hitters and pitchers, even overruling the pitching coach calling specific pitches during the game. The larger culture of assistants being scared to act without head coach approval of even incredibly minor things, which more sports specific, again, just screams to bad culture, whether that's, culture on your staff, culture among the players buying into the staff, all that stuff.
Yeah. And in terms of, the believability of the allegations, everyone listening to this, watching this, whatever the case may be, is going to have to make that determination for themselves about how believable they find the allegations to be. I can understand for some people, you can say, hey, I'm hearing these allegations from 3 individuals who have 0 firsthand knowledge of it, and that, changes how I find the believability. That's understandable. I hope you also understand what we said about why the individuals who spoke with us were not comfortable going public or putting their name on it. But in terms of, the things that just, you hear it and that just made it believable for me, kind of like you said, it's if it was one incident from 1 or 2 people, or, one person who was like, hey, he talked to my 2 friends and they confirmed it, but then we couldn't find anybody else, that might make it a little less believable. That's not the case. It was, we were independently able to go to other people who confirmed the allegations. Some people might be like, oh, this sounds like, players who weren't getting any playing time who are bitter. That's not the case. I can assure you that's not what we're talking about here. The fact that, again, incidents like this, like the gun allegation, don't happen, I don't think, very often in good, well-run, well-managed programs. So hearing all of the other stories around it, which we started hearing about the gun allegations within the past week. Not the first time we've had people come to us unprompted and just make allegations about kind of mistreatment and mismanagement of players about Kristin Vesely. Like this was one of those things that happened like drip by drip and then all at once. It's not like it came completely out of left field. I think.
Yeah, it was drip, and then we finally got wet enough that we said, hey, we should probably figure out what this drip is all about.
And then, like Sam said, it's, again, circumstantial evidence doesn't prove anything, but the mass exodus of players this offseason, the absolute frequent churn of assistant coaches, I think kind of indicates that there's something going on there behind the scenes. And, this, what we've heard, explains a lot. Doesn't make it true, but it does. It's just, there's a lot of little things around the allegation that I think led us to giving it more credence. And that's why, because, I think if we weren't, again, we don't know, but if we weren't at the point where we were all pretty certain, we were all pretty ready to bet large sums of money that these things are on the whole are fairly true, and we wouldn't have come and done this podcast. We would have said, hey, I'm sorry, we're not gonna go out and publicly upset a lot of people who we do not want to be upset with us. This was not a fun podcast.
We talked about this for days.
We talked about this more than I think any episode we've had in a long time in terms of what we're going to say, how we're going to say it, how do we approach this.
Yeah, by a wide margin. This was
heck, we fought with each other. I mean, we were all approaching this in different mindsets, in different ways, and in different things we wanted to do. So like, this wasn't an easy conversation for us to have. Like we didn't all 3 go, hey guys, that was great, let's go. It wasn't that at all. It was definitely something that we have poured lots of conversations and time into.
I was going to say, other than maybe like the first couple episodes we ever did when I was still a little nervous, I've never felt nervous going into a podcast episode before. And I, like, my palms are a little bit sweaty. Like I did not want to have to do this episode. I do not want to be doing this freaking episode with you guys. But just given what we heard, it felt like we had no choice but to pass along, what we've been told. So that's where we're at. And just kind of my last bullet point, my last thought is just a big thank you to everyone who spoke with us. I know it was a tough decision for a lot of people. A lot of them did not want to do it, but kind of were in the same situation as us where they felt like they kind of had to, even though like, yeah, this might not be in my best interests, but I kind of feel like I have to do this to say something. So thank you to everybody who did speak with us. That we really don't take for granted that you were willing to do that. That you were willing to trust us with your anonymity in this situation. We're willing to trust our discretion. So thank you. We hope we've kind of done your story justice in terms of telling the story that you wanted to tell of your experiences within the U of H softball program. So. That's where we're at. That's what I got. And man, looking forward to hopefully going back to just talking about some publicly available knowledge as it pertains to Cougar sports in the future.
Yeah.
I was going to say, guys, I have just two kind of final thoughts, if you'll allow me on this.
Go ahead,
so
buddy.
My first one is trying to put myself in the perspective of a parent, sibling, or even friend or significant other of the various different people that we talk to for this, and feeling a lot of anger at players being put in potentially dangerous situations, that the various people whose jobs involve keeping those players from being in a dangerous situation didn't just passively ignore or insulate themselves from the problem, but in a lot of cases actively doing nothing about it, or even allowing for retaliation in the face of some extremely serious things being alleged here. I mean, just imagine, guys, being a parent of one of the numerous players in this roster, sending your child, maybe your only child, to play for this program, and in doing that, explicitly placing your trust in a number of different people, including the head coach, including members of UH's athletic administration, and having those parties not only shirk their responsibility, but in some cases actively work against those who've expressed, I think, valid concerns about a scary and dangerous situation. And this is anger, I think, more specifically at, I just want to say, repeating it, the obvious conflict of interest of having an administrative direct report for the softball program be close friends to the program head coach and work with that head coach, from our understanding, to actively punish and break anonymity on players expressing to us what sure seems like valid concerns with this program and how it's been run. And certainly, again, the sports admin shouldn't be a rubber stamp agreement for any player who might be not happy with their head coach or a specific staff member. But again, the most common through line of all the various perspectives we got, the thing that absolutely every single fucking person we talked to told us, was that the mechanisms in place to hold this head coach accountable not only failed to hold this head coach accountable, but did everything in their power to suppress it, everything in their power to punish those who dared to speak out. Again, this whole situation is exhibit A, why someone whose job involves holding some kind of leadership position person, whether that's a sport head coach or a department head at a company, to hold that person accountable should not have that close conflict of interest kind of relationship. That Chris Pesman allowed this arrangement to be basically an open secret for years, I'll just be kind to him and say does not reflect well on his leadership of the athletic department, does not reflect well on his character as a person. And my other general feeling, and I said this earlier, I kind of hinted at it, it's bafflement. Just being baffled at U of H's response when a number of these allegations were brought up previously to various different people in leadership. And again, I'm not saying that serious accusation should always result in the accusation being rubber stamped as correct. Someone being accused of something has a right to defend themselves, but there's not any real evidence here that U of H has done any kind of serious investigation, no matter what they say in their statement. Simply investigating anything, it's not an acknowledgement of any accused party's guilt or innocence. And I just don't see much evidence that U of H has even done that much. I mean, put it this way. After the fact that UH acknowledges this story to the extent of saying that there was an internal investigation, they tell that to us. I think that's news to any of the different sources we talked to. We didn't get any kind of impression that they were aware of U of H having currently investigated this or investigated in the past. And what was U of H's hope here? That's the baffling part for me. That all the events would magically go away if they were ignored for long enough? Like, I think the most charitable interpretation here is that the actions or inactions here show a huge amount of naivete. And I think this whole situation shows somewhat of a level of institutional arrogance, that none of the parties in a leadership role here believe they have any kind of accountability to anyone, whether that's U of H softball players and staff, the people who care about those players and staff, the UH fan base at large, and I guess accountability to the University of Houston. It's not pleasant. And chances are, if you're like us listening to this, you have some kind of inherent bias towards the University of Houston and you want to see its athletic teams do well. All three of us here are U of H alums and fit that description of wanting to see the athletic teams do well. So go back to kind of what I said at the beginning, that the one thing we got from talking to a number of different sources for this was that a lot of them still had positive feelings towards U of H institutionally and wanted this program not to be held back by the people currently in leadership, both at the head coaching and administrative level, who I think it's pretty clear don't have the best interests of the student athletes of this program at heart. So none of us can predict the future. I don't know what's going to become of this tomorrow or next week or next month, but I know I speak for myself and you two when I say that we couldn't have lived with ourselves if we had chosen to ignore this story. When we hope whoever you are, regular listener to the show or someone who just tuned in for this one, that you listen to all of what we talked about in this episode with an open mind. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
Look, there are very few things that I love more than this university, if any. And I say this to people in my life. I don't need you to be perfect. I need you to be better. I need U of H to be better. After hearing these allegations, we have to get better. To Sam's point, we talk about, look, the three of us, we're not big dollar donors, right? We don't give a lot of money to the university. We don't have that kind of influence. But we do have these microphones. We do have the trust of you listeners. We have that. And all we can do is share with you guys so that we together can make this university better. It's not about us. It's not about Coach Vess. It's not about Pesman. It's not about anything else. It's about making our university better and what that looks like. We have to be better, because if we're not, then we're no better than everything we've made fun of at Baylor. No better than anything that we've talked about with any other institutions, where we talk about them and say it is a complete failure and that how did they not know? All we can do is share our experience in what all we can do is share what we've heard. This is our donation to the university. Getting people excited about all the sports that this university offers. So while we don't do it with a lot of money, we get a lot of people interested in talking about the Cougs. This is our donation, and this is us saying, be better, University of Houston. We need you to be better.